The last few days I've been hearing an awful lot of people calling Pyramid Head OP, and I'm here to tell you that he's not. First of all, hello everyone, my name's EarthToLydia and I am a very boosted Survivor main. Having said that, I do still have a pretty decent amount of hours in the game, so I picked up a couple of things along the way, and unfortunately, one of the things about being a Survivor main is that you cannot play against every killer the same way. A lot of people think that you can, and therefore they hate playing against certain killers because they don't change up the playstyle and frequently lose against those killers. But the fact is that you cannot run the nurse the same way that you play against a pig, for example. And Pyramid Head is certainly one of those killers that you need to adapt to. Before we get into the main juice of the video, I just want to tell those of you that don't already know that my main job is streaming Dead by Daylight on Twitch at twitch.tv/EarthToLydia. So if you want to interact with me personally and talk about some more of these topics, then that's the best place to catch me. So for us to understand how to counter Pyramid Head, we first need to understand how he works. Now, there's no doubt that Pyramid Head has a lot of strengths, but he also has his fair share of weaknesses too. Pyramid Head's power comes in several forms, the first of which is Rights of Judgment. Rights of Judgment is, in short, a stance that Pyramid Head takes on when sticking his sword into the ground. When in this stance, his speed is slowed to 110 movement speed, when usually he's 115 movement speed. For reference, 115 is the same walking speed as Trapper, Uncloaked Wraith, Hillbilly, Tier 2 Myers, Doctor, Pig, etc, etc. And 110 is the same movement speed as Hag. When using Rights of Judgment, he'll leave a red-coloured trench behind him called the Trail of Torment. When walking or running over the Trail of Torment, you'll gain the Tormented status effect, and if within 32 meters of the killer, he'll get Killer's Instinct, which gives him an indicator as to where you are. If he chooses, Pyramid Head can also fire a ranged attack called Punishment of the Damned, which is 8 meters in length by default, though he does have some range extenders in his add-ons. So where does this make him strong? Based off of the information that we've got right there, Pyramid Head is particularly strong at unsafe loops and points where a survivor is locked into a vaulting animation. For example, when you're vaulting a T-wall. Pyramid Head's strength lies in the predictability of survivors. If you're at an unsafe pallet loop, you'll have difficulty against him, particularly once the pallet has been thrown, so you want to keep it up for as long as humanly possible. So where is his weakness? I know this is going to be a really frustrating answer for a lot of people, but just keep your distance. As we've already established, Pyramid gets his strength from unsafe loops and survivors moving predictably at loops. Therefore, the longer that you can put off committing to a loop, the better. Also, the more unpredictably that you move, the better. So when you're rounding the corner at that T-wall, and you would normally vault, if you hear him going into Rights of Judgment, don't vault the window. If you see Pyramid Head approaching from a distance, start rotating around the map as soon as you can, and if possible, you should avoid the smaller loops. If you can, you should be looking for larger loops with some line of sight breaks. You'll get an audio cue whenever Pyramid Head goes into Rights of Judgment mode. If he does this from the other side of a wall, then try not to move in the way that you'd normally run this, as you'll most likely run into his line of fire. Remember, he's slower in his stance, and it's difficult for him to turn back on himself when he's in this mode, so use that to your advantage. Put some space between the two of you. Another thing that you should probably be mindful of is that a lot of Pyramid Heads will be running I'm All Ears, which allows them to see your aura after you perform a fast action. So if you do this, don't try to hide after vaulting, just move at least 8 meters away from him and don't attempt any mind games because the chances are he can see exactly what you're doing. Another really important factor to consider is that Pyramid Head's ranged attack can only be used on perfectly horizontal floors. If you're on uneven land, stairs, a ramp, or a vault point that leads to a drop, then he will not be able to hit you with his ranged attack. So you can confidently take those areas of uneven land as tightly as possible without having to mind game or worry about him being able to hit you from further away. Also, if you have buildings or structures with multiple stories, then this limits the amount of times that he can use his ranged attack on you. So basically, swamp maps are your best friend. The next thing to consider is his Trail of Torment. As we mentioned earlier, if you run or walk over the Trail of Torment, then you get the Tormented status effect, and next time you're downed, you can be sent to a Cage of Atonement rather than a hook. Alternatively, if it's your death hook, Pyramid Head can perform Final Judgment, which is a short Mori-like animation. However, if you crawl or crouch over the Trail of Torment, then you will not be tormented. So I would strongly suggest that if you don't absolutely have to run or walk over the trail, then don't. These trails do eventually disappear over time as well, and cannot be placed around certain areas like hooks. There is also a limit to how much that Pyramid Head can put down, and if he goes over this limit, then the older trails will disappear. If you or a teammate does unfortunately find yourself inside a Cage of Atonement, then you need to consider that at present, hook-related perks like Decisive Strike, Borrowed Time, Off the Record, Deliverance, anything that you can think of related to being unhooked does not apply to the Cage of Atonement. Therefore, you need to be so careful when rescuing rescuing a teammate or being rescued. This factor has unfortunately led to a few killers camping the cages and tunneling the survivors being saved, so you need to ensure that wherever possible you can rescue them safely. If the killer is camping the cage, then try and get other teammates to help you with the rescue, and make sure to body block so that the survivor gets a safe distance away and you can all spread the effort. When rescuing someone from a cage or being rescued from the cage, it will remove your tormented status effect, so you don't have to worry about being put straight back into the cage. But again, you can't rely on perks like Decisive Strike or Borrowed Time, so you need to coordinate this. In the same regard, if the killer puts the survivor into the Cage of Atonement, you can also play into the fact that their hook-related perk will not activate either. So for most killers, that's Barbecue, but this also applies to perks like Devour Hope. This should give you some more confidence in sticking a generator or getting over to the cage before the killer does without being spotted. Also, keep in mind that this will take a little time to adapt to, and as always, the best way of learning how to counter a killer is to also play as them and see what limitations there are from the killer's point of view. I could go on a little bit more, but this video would get way too long if I dropped every tip, so I'm gonna call it there. If you've enjoyed watching, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It greatly helps out the channel. You can also suggest future ideas in the comments below. I'd love to hear what kind of suggestions you have. As mentioned earlier, I stream Dead by Daylight 5 days a week on Twitch as well, and all of my other social medias, including the link to our Discord server, are down below. Thank you all again so much for making it this far into the video, and I'll catch you next time.